the achievement-based funding model does not adequately reflect issues like this. That institution was taken away from these children, and that was one of the only things keeping them off the streets. Once it was closed, I had friends who dropped out of school. They didn't even go to high school and were subsequently shot because they turned to gangs, because that was the only institution there to support them. So as it pertains to SOU, SOU is disadvantaged by this particular funding model as well. About 70% of the students who come into the school don't graduate from there. Graduation is one of the requirements. So, you know, the high percentage of non-traditional students, things like this, we have a high transfer rate, and to continue to defund us because of things that aren't necessarily within our control would only hurt the school and ultimately cause it to close its doors, which would be bad for this area, would be bad for the students, and it would be bad for the state. So thank you.
Good evening, my name is Lori Stamper and I'm a sophomore at Southern Oregon University. I'm here to urge you today to invest our very limited educational resources in the state of Oregon wisely. I strongly disagree with the OEIB funding team's recommendation to build a pre-K to 20 longitudinal information system. I feel that this is not only unnecessary and costly, but redundant and potentially problematic for our current educational system. This system would require more layers of administration to an already over-administered system. Oregon is not well known for its ability to implement technology systems like the pre-K through 20 information system, and therefore stands to waste time, energy, and resources that will not be serving the best interest of Oregon's education. We already have transcripts and tracking systems in place for students. This system is not the solution to Oregon's educational problems. These resources could be much better spent on funding efforts to support transformative education models that respond to the needs of the 21st century student. Our education system is largely modeled on an outdated academic model, and these funds could be much better spent in encouraging innovative and effective educational endeavors that get at the heart of effective education based upon emerging teaching pedagogies and effective learning and teaching explorations. Thank you.
Alan Berlin, Mark Bonney, Jason Pennell, and Drew Potch, please.
Good evening, I'm Alan Berlin from Southern Oregon Head Start. I spent 40 years working with low-income children, children with disabilities and their families. I am here to speak to the learning outcome, one, children entering school ready to learn. I'm heartened that the board has identified pre-K as a core first step to school success. However, I'm concerned about the notion of non-neutral formula funding and the risk that this non-neutral formula funding presents to low-income children and their families. These children we serve come from the lowest income families in our community. They're the poorest of the poor and the most at risk. These children require comprehensive services, not just educational services, but health, mental health, nutrition, disabilities, and family support services to be successful in school. They receive all of these from the Head Start program, and the measurements and studies show that they are successful entering kindergarten ready to learn. These children must be protected, and funds that serve these children going into these new hubs that are at this point unformed, untested, and unproven put the services to these children at risk. OPK Head Start isn't broken and doesn't need a fix. There are no new funds proposed, and I'm concerned with the Commission for Children and Families style hub system, which has proven unsuccessful in the past, that we will have funds siphoned off, spent on administration and on other programs, so that our program will either be lessened or watered down. I think this is short-sighted. My fear is that the changes proposed will be financed on the backs of our youngest and poorest children and their families.
Good evening. My name is Mark Boney, and I'm a retired computer science instructor from Road Community College. I'm here tonight because of concerns that I have over the EFT summary recommendations to the governor in regards to funding for community colleges. The report identifies 4 strategic investments and then prioritizes these strategic investments ahead of formula funding. Since formula funding includes base funding, this implies that if the state cannot fund both strategic investments and base funding, then the strategic investments will not be investments at all, but are reallocations of funds away from core instruction and operations and into those strategic priorities. Given the recent funding history for community colleges, this seems a likely scenario. Establishing an adequate base funding level in collaboration with community colleges should be an essential first step for the board, and strategic investments should be allocated to community colleges above this established base funding level. The report also recommends that 30% of the funding formula for the 2013-15 biennium should be based on how successful the college is at meeting performance measures. All of the performance measures identified in the report are included in the Community College Achievement Compacts, but the report does not state that this 30% of formula funding should be tied to the Achievement Compacts.
30 seconds.
The Community College Achievement Compacts also include measures for public funding, including state funding, which is the board's obligation in the compact. By not explicitly stating in the report that the 30% funding is tied to Achievement Compacts, allows the board to commit the colleges to their part of the Achievement Compacts while allowing the board to ignore their commitment in the compacts to funding.
2 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, OEIB members. My name is Jason Pennell, and I'm a student at Southern Oregon University. I'm sitting before you here today because I'm very concerned about the future of higher education in the state of Oregon. The problem is that access to higher education is becoming less and less available to students every legislative year that passes, while funds for higher education are being cut. And Southern Oregon University is a regional public university that is the only opportunity for many Oregonians living in the area. However, our school is receiving less public funds every year, which has driven up the cost of tuition and caused our universities to have to cut valuable programs. In 2001, our institution received 2/3 of its budget from state funds. Today, it receives less than 1/3 of our operating costs from the state. This doesn't even cover the cost of our instructors and their benefits. The problem is best illustrated by the facts of how much it costs to educate a student at SOU compared to the actual funds brought in for each student. The average cost of educating a student at SOU is about $10,000, which is one of the lowest costs in the OUS system to educate a student in a higher university. Yet we only generate about $6,853 from the combination of tuition and state funds. This leaves us at a $3,147 deficit to educate an in-state student. This is forcing our universities to prioritize recruiting out-of-state students and international students because that's the only way that they can survive.
30 seconds.
This is a big problem for a public university charged with serving the population of Oregon. Our funding model is unsustainable, and we stand to lose the very institutions we depend on to educate the next generation of students. This phenomenon is a direct result from the funding priorities and legislative decisions made by the state. If we do not do something to reverse the trend of defunding higher education, we face to see our public institutions forced to follow the path of privatization and prioritizing service to those who can pay rather than those who actually need an education. So thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Drew Cook. I currently attend Southern Oregon University. I am coming on behalf of all students of higher education. I would like to reason that more money needs to be allocated for higher education. Specifically, I'm here to talk about the Oregon Opportunity Grant and state-subsidized costs for schools. Both are in need of more funding. I'm a Western undergraduate exchange student, and I pay more than many of my peers. While the Oregon Opportunity Grant is essential and needs more funding, I'm here to specifically advocate the state reinvestment in higher education to keep tuition costs down. I am paying my own way through college with no help from my parents. My parents make too much money for me to qualify for any type of grants or scholarships. I am taking out bank-owned loans, and that will cost me. At the current rate, which is possibly going up again, I will owe over $150,000 in debt when I graduate. If the cost of education goes up, I will not be able to afford to go to this school any longer. I love it here, and I'm thriving. It would be a shame to lose students because it becomes unaffordable to all but the wealthiest of students. Thank you for your time and your consideration. We appreciate your work.
Lisa Cross, Deanna Anderson, Joshua Danielson, and Raul Tovar.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Lisa Cross, and I work for the Three Rivers School District for 18 years. I have a recommendation for changes that you can make right now that will positively affect thousands of students. I would like to share my concern of the basic inequity of transportation reimbursement and how it directly affects Three Rivers School District. I'm going to use an example, and I'm going to compare us to our neighboring district, Grants Pass, and use 2011 figures from the Oregon Department of Education. If you compare total funding per student, Grants Pass receives approximately $5,900 per student. We receive $6,200 per student. You might assume that Three Rivers has more money to spend on educating students, but the reality is that our unreimbursed student transportation is $1.278 million. Grants Pass unreimbursed transportation was $474,000. That means it costs our district $800,000 more every year just to get our students to the front door. What could $800,000 buy every year? 11 teachers. That would make an enormous difference to our 35-to-1 student ratio. It could buy 5 school days. I'm sure you're aware of all the reductions that all of the districts have had to make over the last few years. But $800,000 for 1 year, just imagine what the last 20 years could have thought. I'm requesting that you look at this inequity and come up with a formula that eliminates the differences in unreimbursed student transportation and gives districts like Three Rivers even footing for educating students. Thank you again for your time.
Hello, my name is Diana Anderson. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I'm a former Oregon teacher and researcher, and have been in school restructuring and lifelong learning for 20 years. And after listening to these amazing college students, I'd like to propose, if you want to do a 40-40-20 split in the future by, 2025, that maybe you could come out with a voucher program and just start out giving those students who can show that they can make it through college and graduate with honors a voucher to go to college and get their tuition free that way. I'd be willing as a taxpayer to support a voucher system for college-bound honor students. Okay? Anyway, on to the subject that I was going to review tonight. I'd like to take the words from a transition team goal research paper on findings and recommendations that was published not long ago by the OEIB. One paragraph stood out kind of sorely with me when I was reading it, because It essentially says that Oregon had tried in the past to do public-private partnerships in order to enact restructuring in the state. And they did in the 90s. But now this approach seems to be not making the progress that it had hoped for. So it's, quote, right now, it's saying that it necessitates changes in the structures, accountabilities, business and operating model of state government. So in other words, OEIB is more or less restructuring how we think about education in the state. Secondly, though, that it knows that the people with the resources to do this may not necessarily be at the local level. They state here it requires that nonprofit management organizations have the skills and resources to assemble,
2 minutes.
coordinate, measure, and report the specific elements necessary for collective action. And now with the standards that these students are supposed to meet in this state, Common Core generic standards to be filled in with the content, culture of the sustainable standards are being brought into the state by nonprofits. The International Environmental Development Foundation, their program, Zero Waste Alliance, has brought the sustainable standards. That will be the new content for the Common Core. Of course, Gates Foundation brought in the Common Core standards with the money behind that. And the validation team members, even they have some things to say. Cloud Institute from outside the state is now integrating these standards together with the help of the EPA and the North American Association for Environmental Education. So if anyone has anything to say about local control, they better look at all the outside nonprofits that OEIB has admitted that they're going to be implementing the standards for our students. And I think a second look,
3 minutes, 30 seconds.
okay, needs to be done by all citizens and the boards and the State Board of Education on finding out who is really restructuring our schools and our standards. Thank you very much.
Hello, OEIB. My name is Joshua Daniels. Thank you for coming. My name is Joshua Daniels, and I'm the student body president at Southern Oregon University. And I'm here to speak with everyone today. So I just want to start before I read what I wrote and say that since I was in kindergarten and going all the way through where I am now, my senior year, getting ready to graduate, I have seen cuts. Every program I've been in, K through 12, community college, programs keep getting cut left and right behind me, and I'm somehow making it through this system. And I feel really, really bad about how my kids are going to have to make it through this system when I have kids, 2 or 3 years from now. So this is big concerning. So I would like to read this. If you are serious about working towards achieving Governor Kitzhafer's 40-40-20 goal, then I hope you will see the importance of higher education institutions in realizing this goal. Higher education institutions like SOU are the central pillar in educating students in Oregon and preparing students for the productive work opportunities that drive Oregon's economy. While K through 12 education is important, I am alarmed by the neglect of the needs of higher education in the state's budgeting allocations of the past. We must ensure that higher education is accessible and obtainable to students in Oregon. The only way this will be possible is to invest in higher education to make the rates of tuition affordable and also invest in aid funding like the Oregon Opportunity Grant to make sure that students qualified and deserving higher education can realize that dream. The reality that we live in is 2 out of 8 students qualifying for the Oregon Opportunity Grant actually receive it. At last night's Senate meeting that we had, I pulled the room and to find student debt, and over 1/3 of the students in there had over $25,000 in student debt. And there were even students that had over $50,000 in student debt. And meanwhile, tuition rates have doubled in the last 10 years at SOU. This is not working. Oregon students, communities, and economy are paying the price. Please recommend to the governor funding for higher education that gets us back on track and justifies the public in universities names gives at our state school. Thank you.
My name is Raul Tovar. I am a senior at SOU. I work with the Oregon Student Association and I sit on the Oregon Students Color Coalition.
Oh, stop!
And I'd like to begin by saying I am and have been a recipient of the Oregon Opportunity Grant. And I'm very thankful for that. As we know, most people, you're more likely to receive the Oregon Opportunity Grant if you're a person of color because of how race is related to low income into our society. And I do identify as a person of color, and I'm also a first generation college student, and I also come from a low income family. And this first term in the fall, I didn't have the Oregon Opportunity Grant in my financial aid packet. And I knew then, for the first time, that without the Oregon Opportunity Grant, I would not be going to school. I didn't know what I was going to do. Luckily, it came in. There was a mistake. But without the Oregon Opportunity Grant, I knew I wouldn't been through college. But I also realized that I was depending solely on the Oregon Opportunity Grant to stay in college. So I want students who've come from marginalized communities like myself to be able to afford college and not depend on the Oregon Opportunity Grant. I grew up here in Oregon, actually in the city of Medford, and I attended Head Start. I went through a lot of accelerated education programs, and I believe the state did prepare me for college. But I want to know that students like myself aren't marginalized from going to college. Only 2 out of 10 students that are eligible for Oregon Opportunity Grant receive it. I'm one of the lucky ones. But I want to make sure that other students and my brother and my sister are not marginalized just because they cannot afford. So even though we do need to invest in the Oregon Opportunity Grant, we also need to focus on keeping tuition lower so we don't solely base everything on the Oregon Opportunity Grant and expect everything from the Oregon Opportunity Grant. Thank you.
Sam Longenecker, Sean Lowry, Katie Dwyer, and Peter Engstad. Please.
Good evening, my name is Sam Longenecker. I'm a member of, at Southern Oregon University and a member of the student government. First and foremost, I'd like to mention a few concerns carried by the OSA, the Oregon Student Association. We are disappointed that the OEIB has not recommended to reinstate our general operating budgets. Specifically, we are concerned this budget suggests funding special degree programs instead of reinstating our much needed full-time faculty positions, academic advisors, or financial aid advisors. There is nothing in this budget that will keep tuition prices manageable, and instead, it appears that we will continue to see cuts to essential services and probably, increase in tuition to pay for information systems and specialized degree programs. The Task Force on Student Success just completed their work and clearly identified that a core focus needs to be making tuition more affordable. Since only 2 out of 10 students who qualify for the Oregon Opportunity Grant received that award, why aren't we working at least to keep tuition increases minimal while we wait for more need-based funding? We are concerned that directing 30% of our already decreased funding to degree completion will compromise quality by incentivizing increased class sizes, limiting access to academic and financial aid advisors, and trading tenured faculty for more part-time who are already stretched. If Oregon was to see 40-40-20 possible, we need to make education affordable for all, not just for people who can't afford it.
30 seconds.
I'm a first generation college student. I plan on being a teacher, and at this point, if tuition keeps increasing, I may not be able to continue with school. So it's a concern for me, and thank you for your time.
My name is Sean Lowry. I'm a student at Southern Oregon University in Ashland. I find myself speaking in lieu of my current financial status surrounding my student loan debt and future. Currently, I'm studying business and biology. I have another 1.5 years until I will graduate. As of this year, I have met my limit in subsidized loans, which is $22,000. Overall, I've accrued $33,000 in loans, and in addition, owe my mother nearly $15,000 Parent Plus loans. I've been getting the opportunity grant and would like to emphasize how much of my success staying in school has been greatly supported by this grant. I hope to graduate with little debt as possible, which is why I refuse to take out any more loans as of this year. I work full-time and have been throughout my college career. Currently, I work so much that I barely have time to feed myself and do well enough in my studies. I'm getting by, but I know that I will have, that I barely have enough time to feed me. That I would not further my, let's start again. I'm getting by, but I know that I would rather not further my enslavement to a ridiculously designed, amortized loan that will enslave my existence for years to come after college. Just like No Child Left Behind, if you design a system based upon results, especially in a non-traditional school like SOU, the results will be working against the main goal. Schools and students need funding in order to succeed successfully, not succeed first and then get rewarded with more funding. Funding literally has a direct correlation to my success in class. If I didn't have time to take on the idea of being enslaved after college and working 40 plus hours outside of my 15 to 18 credit average life in school, I'd be getting straight A's. The teachers as well would be getting the justice they deserve for their efforts, and their students could actually be in school or in my case, having time to do their studies.
30 seconds.
I'm one of the lucky few that even get loans offered at this point in my career, but I still refuse them. A nearly 7% interest rate on student loans is literally on the same level of interest found on the housing market. I'd rather have a house and be enslaved. That would be better than being houseless and enslaved, which is what it's looking like. This has to change. Higher education has a direct correlation with the success of our country and the empowerment of entrepreneurs that run it and set the trends for the future. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Peter Angstead. I'm president of Rogue Community College, and welcome back to Southern Oregon. A couple comments. First, on the funding formula tied to the performance measures. I guess I would reference the recommendation that formula design should be reflective of the very distinct regional missions and populations. It really needs to be locally driven, because what works in Southern Oregon may not work along the coast, may not work in Northern Oregon, may not work in Eastern Oregon. And each of us has locally elected boards that are very in tune with citizens' demands and wishes. And I think among the partnerships of all our educational continuum here from the P through 20 system, we work with early childhood education, we work with the K through 12, we work with community colleges, our colleague community colleges and our regional universities, as well as the Job Council, employers, local citizen groups. And we have a very smooth transition that is reflective of our regional demands, and that's so important. You can't just outline a specific measure. I think local measures and local design is so important. For Rogue Community College, we provide a great return on investment, and I think education is one of the best investments that we can make, and we have to put some investment in. There's no investment in the world that you continue to cut and yet expect greater and greater returns. It just doesn't work. And so with that, as I said, it has to be locally driven. And we have good partnerships right now that will pick up the banner and make sure that we meet the standards and measures of good practice. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kate Dwyer, and I live in the Illinois Valley in the Three Rivers School District. I'm an active parent, and I also run our public library. I have a 6th grader and a 10th grader, but it's our 2nd grade that I'm alarmed about. The class that I help in for 2nd grade has 34 students, 20 of whom are reading at a kindergarten level. They're over a full grade behind in reading. And why? So I looked at that. Did these kids get to go to 1st grade? Did they get to go to kindergarten? They did. And they went with highly qualified teachers. But they went to a class with an overcrowded classroom and too few school days. And I talked to some of those teachers, and they're very qualified, dedicated, passionate teachers, and these kids have now reached the 2nd grade unable to read properly. And we all know that if they reach the 3rd grade unable to read properly, they won't be able to read to learn. Now is when they need to learn to read. And when I asked our district, what is the problem? Why can't we get another teacher in here? Because the class sizes are just too huge. Our district is overburdened with the transportation difficulty for reimbursement that Lisa Cross told you about. So without being able to get more teachers into those classrooms, the class size matters dramatically. So we have all the elements we need to teach those children. We have highly qualified, dedicated teachers. We have qualified administrators. We have adequate classrooms. We have everything we need, except there are too many kids in the room because we can't afford enough teachers. We all know that no matter how many programs we give our kids at all ages, without basic primary literacy, they're not going to be able to meet those needs. So even though I have kids in the high school that I'm quite concerned about, and a whole library to run, I'm in there trying to help kids in the 2nd grade learn to read, because those are the ones that are drowning right now. And so I'm urging you to look at class size and basic primary literacy first.
Alan Day, Julie DeGino, Lisa O'Connor, and Sonia Lamax, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alan Day, and as is probably obvious, I'm a Southern Oregon University student, but also I'm a parent with college-age children as well. I also have a high school and junior high school age child, and so education is a huge issue for me in my life. And unfortunately, I see education falling behind as a priority in our state. I see that testimony after testimony talks about how K through 12 is underfunded. We've heard how tuition's going up at all levels of the college experience, community college, university, and this just can't continue. Education has to be made a priority, and I see around the room that students are a priority stickers. I would encourage you, especially because I see that things like reading and the STEM program, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics are considered priorities already by the board. I would point out that both of those programs lead people towards collegiate education, that to get into any science or engineering or technology area requires a minimum of a bachelor's degree. I'm a physics and history major with a desire to be an educator, and I can tell you that nobody in the physics program, nobody I know in chemistry, biochemistry, those sorts of things, none of them are even considering starting life without at least a bachelor's degree, and most of them are looking at graduate school.
30 seconds.
And the horrible part of all of that is that many of us are low income, we're trying to get through school, trying to get to the place where we have to be just to be able to become employed and be a productive member of society. And many of us are starting with tens of thousands of dollars in debt. I'm already $65,000 in debt, and I still have to go to grad school. I'd like this to be kept in mind when you're thinking about where money needs to go and when you're making recommendations to our governor as to where education needs to be. Remember that 80% of it is collegiate based. Thank you so much.
Good evening. I'm Lisa O'Connor. I am a native Oregonian, a mother with one in college and one in high school. And my kids have been given incredible opportunity just because of how they were born and the world that they were born into. And there are a lot of kids out there that don't have the same opportunity. So I'm working with a group of local nonprofits to try to create what's called the Promised Neighborhood in order to focus on, it's not really a new initiative, but to replicate a model that we found incredibly successful in Atlanta, Georgia. Bring that model here and leverage community resources to create an environment that supports families of all geography, backgrounds, ethnicities. In order to do that, it does take a community effort. We are encouraging the board to take a holistic funding approach to look at things beyond just education, although that is the key. Creating a cradle to college pipeline paired with community wellness and family support, and tying in mixed use and affordable housing. We think that there have been many failed approaches to try to remedy poverty, and that it's time for us to do something different. And we think that an approach such as this fits very well with the governor's desire for his, well, K through 20, but we're saying cradle to college approach, and we're encouraging you to seek funding for focusing on early childhood, after-school programs, extending the school day, schools of choice, and help us help our kids be better prepared and even see that there is hope for them to enter into college, because I think there's an entire population out there that doesn't even see that as a possibility, and we want to remedy that.
I'm Julie DeCuro, Superintendent of Ashland Schools. Thank you for being here tonight. We always appreciate it when people from up north understand that I-5 goes past Eugene, so thank you for being here. Ashland School District is very successful in serving the needs of our students. All of our schools were rated outstanding, with the exception of one, which was satisfactory. We had, last year, had a 1.2 dropout rate. We have over 94% graduation rate. Over 90% of our kids go on to 2- and 4-year colleges. The success of our schools is directly related to our wonderful teachers who give over and above what can be humanly expected to make sure that all of our children are able to achieve at a very high level. Unfortunately, our school is stretched very, very, very thin, almost to the breaking point, as we try this year to implement Common Core, proficiency-based grading, performance-based evaluation systems with no new funding. In fact, these mandates come to us with a very unrealistic timeline, and yet we don't have any funding to try to accomplish those things. So my message to OEIB and Dr. Crew, to you, is to please restore baseline funding for K-12 before passing any more new initiatives. We are definitely at initiative overload. The ideas that